I would like to come back to the statement of the American College of Medical Genetics, because I would like to take again the example you gave of Greta, because this is not a good example. And I think the Greta example, the woman who once was Huntington's disease, for two reasons. The statement of the American College for Medical Genetics did this, that you have to disclose the 56 genes. If you do an exome or whole genome sequencing, which you would never do for Huntington's disease, because the mutation which you would look for, you won't see it in an exome. So I think it's very important to leave targeted analysis, like for Huntington's disease, to the normal clinical setting we put up for 20 years for pre-symptomatic testing. In Canada is one of the pioneer countries for this. So if you do something completely targeting, you're not in danger to have all these incidental findings. The interesting thing is now, if you do the exome for diagnostic setting, you don't know what the patient has, you do the exome, and then you find, in addition to the incidental one, the question is if you give this back to the patient. And I think the American College of Medical Genetics was not completely wrong, saying that some of those has to be given back, and how and when. But we have a lot of time to discuss this later. Thank you.
So I appreciate that correction. Sometimes we make things for the simplicity of illustration, but you're 100% right. But I don't agree with you about the recommendations of the college. I actually felt that they may not be wrong in the future, but I felt that they were not adequately formulated in the way that they were given to us. But what again, and I really want to reiterate, is that the purpose of this discussion and these kinds of discussions is to modify those kinds of recommendations. They were recommendations, they were not fiat, they were not law. And the college was responsive. And this is the beauty of bringing all the stakeholders together into a room and talking and writing and arguing, and it got a bit ugly, it's true. But it was exciting, right? It was one of the most exciting things that happened to us in ethics in a long time, so.
It was very interesting. First, just about what Emmanuel Hirsch said before, saying that now when you discuss about ethics, there is always patients or representative of patients. There is one place where there is no patients or representative of patients. It's at the Comité National d'Éthique, where you have professionals, you have lawyers, you have philosophers, but you have no representative of patients. This is just one thing.
We are all potential patients.
Yeah, but I think that there are associations that are representative of hundreds and thousands of patients, and they should be there. Okay, but this is, I'm discussing about the essentialism of genetic, because on the one hand, for the brain, you said in some case you should not have the opt-out possibility, and then you say, but in genetic, it's reverse. And I think the world differences, of course, in genetic, there's a lot of things that you can't understand, so it doesn't matter, because you can't understand anywhere, and there's so much that too much information kills information. So, but when you find something that, like in a brain, would be relevant, and not only relevant there for the patient or for the child, but for his parents. If you find, for instance, a mutation that is clearly in a child because he has, I don't know, mental retardation, and you do an exome, and you actually find that he has a mutation in a multiple endocrine neoplasia gene. Actually, this would be relevant maybe for one of his parents and for his uncles or aunts. And I think so one maybe should restrict even more the ACMG things, etc. But I think at one point, if you decide that for brain, there are things where you should not have the opt-out possibility, it should be the same also for a small number of things where very clearly there is something that you can do, and that you can do for the person or for the family, and in a given time. And so I think, and also for discrimination, the essentialism of genetic, I don't believe it. You know, if a young girl is obese or has acne, she has more difficulty to be a cashier at Auchan, okay? She will be discriminated. We know that in France, kids who come from some neighborhoods have more difficulties to enter certain jobs, okay? Just because where they are living from. So we should fight really, this type of discrimination. And, the question of where in some case you could have discrimination being on genetics, especially when you have a lot of information. We are all at risk of something. And at one point, apart from things like Huntington, where really it's not a risk, but it's a certainty, I think discrimination is not coming from them, but from all the rest of our society.
Very quickly, thank you very much for your talk. You spoke of the right not to know in genomic medicine, and I agree with you. But there's a lot of literature that's in bioethics journals or what have you that are now speaking about the family's right to know, children's right to know in the event of a mother who is carrier of a serious disease, or a father, the wife's right to know, to be able to plan the future. That creates a new type of tension, I think, that you referred to earlier, and I think it's something that we have to think about, too, for the future. It was just a comment.
I should add also that in a note of our National Agency of Biomedicine last year, the recommendation was to add systematically at any kind of brain imaging research, because we are not in the general case, we are in the research framework, to add a physician, a referee physician that will survey all the images to try to see independently of the researchers what kind of images should be considered as abnormal and what kind of images should be considered as clinically relevant for some actionability. And if there is no emergent question, I think we are going to break. And no, one more? No, it's going to be with a coffee break. So we are going to make a break, and I ask you to be back at 11 precisely, like that. Our next speaker, Professor Montgomery, will make his presentation on time. Thank you very much.